I'm writing this to tell you that when Donald Trump tells you something about immigration, you should listen even if you don't agree. There's more here than meets the eye. When I was in my early 20s, I was in the construction business and I worked in remodeling. I performed kitchen and bath and home remodels. I also performed small commercial projects. One of my favorites was a high-end hairstyling operation off Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. Donald Trump had a big name in the construction business at that time, and he preferred, it was said, the companies preferred to use HRH as a preferred contractor. At the time, I idolized Donald Trump. He was a dashing businessman, and everything he touched seemed to turn into gold. At one point, he was involved in a real estate deal involving railroad yards, and as he began drilling into the lots to begin construction, they struck oil. It was actually an old rail car that had been buried decades before, for whatever reason. Nevertheless, it was a lighthearted story and contributed to the idea that New York City was the place to be. I worked very hard in my chosen career and began my own company. I wanted to contract with HRH for my own reasons. It was prestigious and appeared to be wealthy, so if you got hooked up with them, you were going places. I worked on a high-rise building in Manhattan, and one of my co-workers was from Ireland. Now we're going to start talking about immigration. As we talked, the subject of immigration came up for some reason, and he'd been talking about Ireland, and he said in Ireland that the high schools taught carpentry, plumbing, electrical work, and all the trades, including steel and glazier glass work. I asked why he didn't stay there and start a company because he was truly an accomplished carpenter. He was great at what he was doing. He told me there was no work there. They were training them, but there was no building going on. There was nothing going on. If they wanted to pursue that, they had to leave the country. And they trained them for work, but once you graduated, the only realistic choice for them was to leave Ireland. He decided to go to the United States and live in New York because his 8 brothers had done the same. I really liked him. We were sitting on top of the building one day having lunch, and I said, well, there's room enough for everybody here. I'll take this side of New York, and you can have that side. And we laughed our heads off. It was great. So eventually I ran into a construction manager from HRH. I met him at a lumber yard. Before Home Depots, Lowe's, and Menards arrived, the lumber yards were the choice of small and large contractors for construction materials. They were like gigantic hardware stores, and they did a good business, and they were important to the economy. Eventually I ran into, this fellow said he had a new project with bathrooms and kitchens, and I thought to myself, oh, jackpot. So I went to meet him, and he showed me the work that needed to be done, and that was to rip out and replace baths and kitchens in apartments. All materials were supplied, labor only, payment on completion of each unit. I was eager to start with the first one, and he asked me how long it would take me. I said each one, about 3 to 5 days. He took me to an apartment under renovation. There were 5 Korean workers there. They had pulled out all the cabinets and were using sledgehammers to dismantle the 6-inch thick tile work in the bathrooms. The construction manager told me that the Koreans completed each project in 1 day. That's the bath and the kitchen and everything they painted all throughout. I noticed they had no masks. Their bodies and clothes were filthy, and the air was clinging and cloying with dust and fibers, including very cancerous fibers. The construction manager told me that they slept on the site. I was bewildered. I mean, what? I'm not going to do that. At that time, I didn't realize what I was looking at was severe exploitation, illegal immigration, and abuse. Remember the company running this now, right? All I could think of was I couldn't compete with that, and I told him so. I was leaving when he had something else for me. He was working in the lobbies of all the buildings, and I took up a contract with them replacing mailboxes in a large residential development. They had been housing there at this development, and they were built in the 1930s through the WPA. That's the Works Progress Administration, Works Project Administration. HRH was doing the project for a construction group that reportedly included Donald Trump's organization, so the Trumps were in there somewhere. I thought this was great because I had this idea that I would work my way up in the construction industry, and one day I'd work for Donald Trump himself, or a period of, whatever. It's kind of like being an actor, but in construction. Those were heady days for me. There were 32 of these mailboxes, and it was a big job for me. I was looking forward to it. Now, America is great. If you arrange things and work hard, you can succeed or fail. But if you fail, you can start again. Donald Trump, he knows that well. And that is one thing that he says that people should listen to. He has repeatedly been lambasted for going bankrupt so often, but really, did he break the law? I don't know about that, because it is the law that he was following, and he used the established system to do that. And he's telling everybody to do that. Am I defending them? No way. No way. It is important, however, for everyone to know that what he is criticized for doing is a widely known and practiced business behavior in the United States. He's not the only one doing it. There's thousands, tens of thousands of people in that industry itself operating in a similar fashion. Some foreign corporations do something similar where they work in the United States for a few years and then they change their names. They change the name by reincorporating, and now they got a new business, new clock, new calendar, and a separation from past work and sometimes debt. It happens. It's happening all the time. Would you do it? You probably wouldn't do it. But they do it because they can do it and it makes them money. So I take that job, right, with the mailboxes. And it's to build the frame for the new mailboxes, basswood. Stain and finish them. Pull out the old brass sets out of the wall, hang the new mailboxes, and dispose of the old. Great, good job, reasonable money. I was on my way. First step up. They fronted me the money for the supplies because they said the supplies were included, so they gave me the money to buy it. And 2 weeks worth with a secondary payment mid-work and a balance on completion. Uh-oh. I went for it. We knocked out the work and we were half done when I went for the secondary payment. The construction manager, now he's nowhere to be found. After 5 days of missing him just by a minute, I finally found him. He told me just to go to the office in Manhattan to get paid. So I thought, okay, this is a pain, but I'll get to go to the construction office. That's great. It was a new thing for me. The next day off I go and I take 2 of my men with me. And the office was in a high-rise building, but it was a little on the downside, this building. It had been built earlier in the century or before. It was kind of hard to tell, 1920s, 30s, probably not the 40s. It was an earlier building. It wasn't run down, it was just plain. I figured it would have had more glitz if it was associated with Trump and HRH, it would look great, but hey, in we go. I find the office on the 3rd floor. Low down in a building is considered to be not good in Manhattan, not good. You don't want to be down by the ground floor unless you're on the ground floor and then you're got a store, weird stuff going on. Anyway, it's on the 3rd floor. And I opened the door, and you know that scene in Beetlejuice, the first Beetlejuice? I haven't seen the second one yet, but there's all these strange people sitting around, all bizarre people waiting for service. No one had a shrunken head in this room I went into, but many seemed like they had shrunken spirits. Now, I had also read Franz Kafka's The Trial, and at one point the main character claims he's not impatient, but he's tired of waiting for a conclusion to his trial. Now, in that room, the walls, please keep that in mind. In that room, the walls were lined with plastic waiting room chairs, all filled with workmen, carpenters, plumbers, electricians. It was clear by the clothing and also the marks on their clothing and the tools some of them were carrying. The room itself was hardly 20 feet wide and 30 feet deep. The room was packed. There were only 2 seats available. My 2 men sat down, and I went over to the glassed office booth in the corner, and there was a clerk at the window. She was a woman. She was answering a phone, and a man was standing behind them. There was a man clerk and a woman answering a phone, and there was another man standing behind both of them staring at the floor. I went to the window, but I had to wait. I was 3rd in line. I remember this so well. The man at the window was just finished up. He was just telling the clerk he would never work for them again and tell everyone. And then he left angrily and slammed the door. The second man was up at bat. Now, he was a plumber. He could hardly speak English and spoke with a heavy Italian accent, so he was new to the United States. The disagreement was over getting paid for a job he had done a year before, a big job for them. And it became heated. They told him to come back the next week. Franz Kafka, remember this? He turned around to me with tears in his eyes, yelling, they don't pay, I'm ruined. Then he stormed out. So there's an immigrant's experience in this industry, okay? And remember who I said was related to it. So my experience wasn't much better, but I got all the information I needed to know. They weren't going to pay up. I knew that now. I wasn't in a bad way, so all I did was stop work. I hadn't gotten ahead of myself. I was sitting on them as much as I could, and I'd go to small claims if they gave me a hassle for the little bit that was left. Now, I left the work, but after a month was encouraged to go back because the construction manager, check this out, I'm just a little guy doing mailbox stuff for HRH and contacted through the construction companies with Trump. Give you an idea of what kind of folks these people were. He was making the rounds in my world. He was going around to all people that he could find that had worked with me and knew me at the lumberyard and all that. And in my social business circle, talking me down and making lots of noise. There was a little bit of I won't say it's a threat, unless you want to use the word threat. I might use that, but I took the men back to finish the job, though I reckon I wasn't going to get paid for that. But I didn't want to have any more trouble with those guys because they were up the creek. You know what I'm talking about? So I took care of it. And when I got to the workroom to perform the last stage, hey, what is going on? There was 20 Irish guys there, 20 Irishmen, literally from Ireland. Some of them just had arrived in the last few weeks. And I know this stuff because I talk to people when I go on jobs, trying to finish my job, but they couldn't do it. So the construction company had tried to hire a scab contractor for me, who was kind of like not a union guy. So I guess that makes me a scab, right? So that was pretty weird. So some of them were hopping mad. Now, they were mad because they were employed as maintenance at the complex and they didn't want to do the work that we were doing. They didn't want to do it. Too bad my friend wasn't around. They didn't even know how. So we took over, finished the job, and left. I received a check later in the mail, but it was $500 short. I just about cut even on that job. No profit. HRH, they ate the profit. They ate it up. Yum, 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 yum. Little guy like me, they couldn't pay right. I have half jokingly said since then that Donald Trump, in fact, owes me the $500 because that's why I got wrapped up in that. And it would have been worse if I'd followed the path of all those other small and medium-sized contractors that had been stiffed. They got stiffed. Now, keep in mind that except for the illegal immigrants, everything that happened throughout this interaction, which was not unusual, was perfectly legal. Donald Trump, who I feel perhaps against logic and circumstance still owes me the $500, has stated repeatedly that everything he did to increase the wealth given over to him by his father was legal. That doesn't mean it was right. And took a look at a few things going on in the world today, right? Now, was it questionable? Maybe. But they don't ask about your morals in business, do they? Especially not in the United States. Just ask DuPont about C8, 3M about PFOA. Talk to the Department of Energy about the nuclear waste materials that are being moved out of Lewiston, New York, Cuyahoga, Ohio, and Hanford, Washington, and brought to the Charter Township of Van Buren. It's crazy. Now, when Donald Trump says that the immigrants will steal American jobs, he's only partly correct. Is it stealing if you do something that an American is taught to avoid, like working in asbestos-ridden, closed-in spaces for a barely living wage? I think these days it is. So I sometimes what happened to those men and their families, the men who were cheated out of their work, the men who were tricked into one job and forced into another, the men who were treated like slaves and exposed to poisonous materials, their labor extracting pain from their bodies. I wonder what happened to them. These were immigrants to the United States, and Americans, people who had been here already, took advantage of them to gain wealth from them. So when Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are talking about immigrants and throwing them out and things, give me a break. Now, they're both saying they want to round up men like that and send them out of the United States. I guess, what is it? Use them up and throw them away? Many may be dead already. We got to bring a stop to this. I thought I'd tell you my story, and I hope you found it interesting. Bye.